Really brief, because I'm someone who actually likes Q&A, because I actually find them easier and more entertaining than long speeches. But I would start by saying I look around the room here and I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of folks that I've enjoyed getting to know over the last few years since joining ADS. It's great to see some AIA folk over here. I spent 3 months with them in Washington a couple of years ago, and it's one thing I love about DC. It's a small, tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. It's a bit like a village, and it's a lot more personal than, say, places like London is sometimes. Just following on, I thought I would talk very quickly about something, because the first question I always get from my nephew, which is a good test, is because he absolutely loves space, is when I said I was working for the UK space sector, he was like, eh. I said, all right. No, I said, so I went to Paris and I was at the European Space Agency and I sent him some stuff back from there. And he went, eh. And then I went to the Johnson Space Center and I sent him back some stuff signed, stuff from astronauts and some astronaut ice cream. Then I was the best uncle ever. And it all comes down to the fact that the question I always get with the UK is that we have a space sector. And it's a fair question, because one of the things about the UK, the space, is what is it in its relationship with ESA in relation to the larger European project, and what does the UK do in space itself? And I can say that it's not often known, but the UK got itself some Nazi space scientists as well. It wasn't just the Americans. And for a while we were developing, up into the 70s, and we had some very interesting launch programs, some famous ones, Black Arrow for instance, and Blue Streak, which was a missile program. But the Thatcher government, the infamous remark, and it's death for any industry, was, why are we in space? The Americans have just landed someone on the moon. I don't understand this industry, so done. And it was often, it's been thought since then that the UK kind of had died on its feet. But what actually happened was those that remained, those that weren't absorbed into defence or aerospace or went back to teaching or whatever they were doing, said, right, we're going to focus like a laser beam on the profitable bits of space. And one of the profitable bits of space, even back then, was satellites. In the burgeoning SATCOM, SatNav areas in particular. And in the academic centre. So, we've contributed a lot to the ESA projects and to NASA in terms of space science projects. But slowly and very quietly, over particularly the last 10 years, we've suddenly realised that we're making a lot of money off this thing. And the world, in particular, what I'll talk about in terms of the downstream, because the UK survives on a fraction of the budget than say Russia or the US or the European budget in total. Very little government support over the years until very recently, but it's realised that if you have true centres of innovation and true enthusiasts, and you know where to make the money, you can actually make a real go of this industry. And that's where we're at. So just to correct something slightly, and I don't blame Ryan for this, he wouldn't have known, but ADS needs to rename itself. It should now be called ADSS, or maybe even SADS if we turn it around, because space is actually the newest division, and it's the 4th division, and I'm head of that new division. And it was based on an experiment 2 years ago when I came back from AIA, and they said, okay, can you get enough new membership? Can you get enough new revenues? Can you do enough at Farnborough to justify making space the last 4th permanent division? And the answer is yes. And that's partly off the great work that we've been able to do since then, but it's also based on the good news story that is the UK space sector. And it was slightly delayed at Farnborough, but the announcement, but I can tell you that the latest growth and health statistics survey results that the UK Space Agency has produced shows that we're still making 9% growth per year, year on year, and this is only, and the latest figures only use recession figures, so we're only talking since 2008 onwards. And they figured we would have been at 11 or 12% if it hadn't been for the recession, because some of the large-scale downstream projects were put on hold because of the recession. So I'm very excited about that, because I'm finding this job scarily easy sometimes. And I'm a true enthusiast in terms of the North American market, because I'm very excited by what's happening over here. And I realise if you're working in government and if you're linked to NASA, times have been tough. We understand that. went through that in the 70s, to be honest. But the move towards commercial and the understanding that we're on the edge of something new is something that on the European side, on the British side, we're looking with great interest. Because we believe that come through the other end of it, there's some real money to be made, there's some real opportunities. And it may not be as sexy as astronauts. And we've got an astronaut here, and I do love spending time with those guys. We've got every boy's dream, vicariously. But at the end of the day, we, in the UK anyway, a lot of what we do as a sector drives a lot of UK economic growth and increasingly European growth. And some of our blue chip companies like Surrey Satellites are just going from strength to strength. And I had a very proud moment recently at the Farnborough Air Show where Richard Branson shook the hand of Sir Martin Sweeting and announced a new deal in which when Spaceship Two and Virgin Galactic gets to a certain point, its next stage, one of its next stages for the next few years, other than taking up rich passengers and Russian princesses, will be to launch low Earth satellites potentially off the back of these ships. And what's exciting about that is, I was in on the Virgin thing early, and at that point the public was very excited about that kind of thing, and industry was very sceptical, and rightly so. And I now think sometimes the public's a bit more sceptical, but industry is more excited because we're starting to see things that were twinkle in the eye a few years ago come to fruition. So if I talk specifically about the UK, I'd say, let's give you some figures just to keep in mind when we sort of go to the Q&A. The turnover of nearly 8 billion in 2008 and 9, and the new figures will also reflect that that's up to about 10 billion. It's a growth percent of, it's now about 8%. It was down from 9%, but again, we're only using recession figures. And promisingly, most of the growth is in downstream. And if there's one thing the UK has been very good at, and I think it might be worth talking here, is taking every aspect of the upstream market that we have and taking from that every potential downstream market there is and plugging into that. And the UK government's realised that with two major initiatives last year, new money. And I don't know if you heard about Austerity Britain, but I think we spent all the money on the Olympics and we really have nothing else left. It's been a great party, but I know the hangover is going to be significant in some ways, but not for space, because space was selected as one of the very few sectors to be given what was called a catapult centre, which was a lot of new money set up in order to take a sector and say, a lot of new R&D will go on here. We will go from the two valleys of death they always talk about in government in terms of new technologies, which is when you've got an interesting idea and you can get it to a point where it's actually something real. Then the next stage, when you've got a fully developed project and product and you turn into something into market. There's only a few sectors that are in the space, and there's the Satellite Applications Catapult Centre, which is called SAC, which I'm still coming to terms with. And the ISEC, which was the International Space Innovation Centre, which has an ESA director for the first time, and then specifically about reaching out to the likes of North America and saying we want to do more projects, more partnerships, more innovation with you all. And I think I'll leave it there until I can go on and on, but I think it's more interesting to go into Q&A. But I will also say this, I'm very excited about some of the new things we've done this year in terms of Space Florida Partnership, and we've just set up an office on the Isle of Man, paid for by the Isle of Man government, and that is not to attract companies to relocate to the Isle of Man, but because of the business opportunities. And that is all about the growth that's there, because the growth in space in the UK has been evenly distributed. Because there's always a danger people think I'm talking about London or the south of England, but a lot of the real new growth is in Scotland, it's on the Isle of Man, it's on parts of Wales and even Northern Ireland. And a lot of it is based on world-class research centres that are very successful spin-offs. So I think there's great potential there, and I said I have probably one of the easiest jobs in the UK at the moment, which is just to sort of ride on all of this and try to make more of it happen. But if I will leave on one note, as a true believer in doing work with North America, one of the most promising things that's come forward in the last 12 months is potential reform around ITAR. Because one of the reasons why we signed an MOU with Space Florida was to see a way in which state governments could support collaboration and get SMEs and some of our more promising downstream companies to do more stuff with US partners. I think it's really welcome, and I welcome those here who support that reform. And I hope that 2 or 3 years from now I can come back and sort of say the same good news in a similar story. But really, I welcome some questions, and more interesting to hear from you what you all think. Thanks very much.